بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Dear audience, good morning. This is Lubna Al-Ghadi. It is my pleasure to welcome you all in the 5th series of faculty enhancing webinars organized by the Department of Medical Education at the College of Medicine, King Saud bin Abdulaziz University for Health Sciences, in collaboration with the Deanship of Postgraduate Education. Our speaker today is Professor Gominda Punampiruma. Professor Gominda is a senior lecturer in medical education at the Faculty of Medicine, University of Colombo, Sri Lanka. He served as an invited speaker and resource person in many international symposia and conferences. Professor Gominda is a postgraduate tutor, examiner, and source material developer for national and international medical education course. His research interests are assessment, including selection of training, curriculum development, and evaluation. Professor Gominda will be speaking to you today about the interesting topic of e-assessment in health profession education. Professor Gominda, welcome on board. You may kindly share your presentation.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Yes, let me start sharing. Right, I think it should work now.
Yes,
right?
I can see your full screen.
Yes. So shall we start right now?
Yes, please.
Okay, so thank you very much for this invitation because this is something close to my heart, and I would love to have an engaging discussion with you as I go on with my presentation. So it's e-assessment in health professions education. Right, so this is the broad overview that we will try to cover during this session. First, we will look at what is an electronic assessment or e-assessment in health professions education. Then we will discuss about opportunities in e-assessment, challenges in e-assessment, possible issues with the reliability and validity of online exam, maintaining professionalism and respecting ethical conduct during e-assessment. And finally, we will look at current trends and future directions in e-assessment. Now, as the framework for this presentation and this talk, I will be going through a particular type of framework, and I will come to you with that in a few minutes. But first, let's look at, as the first slide said, the first bullet point said, what is e-assessment? Well, this is a very, there are many definitions for e-assessment. This is a very, what shall I say, like very practical definition of e-assessment. And it says, assessment that uses electronic or digital technologies in any of its activities. I would underline the word in any of its activities, from planning through implementation to evaluation of assessment. Anything, any of these steps, if electronic media are used, then we can call that an e-assessment. Of course, there will be a relatively small number of exams that in all activities they use electronic or digital technologies, but in most cases we use in some of the activities. Let's see what these activities in a little while. Now, when we call assessment, we know that there are many exams. There are, this is what we call the Miller's pyramid, and the base of the Miller pyramid is assessing the knowledge, and we use these type of exams like MCQs and essays. Then we can assess the understanding or comprehension with also MCQs and structured essay questions or short answer questions, of course with some clinical relevance or with what we call a clinical scenario. That's all about knowledge or cognition. Then we have also exams in medical education and health professions education that assesses shows how. those are skills at a simulated level. So OSCE, long case, short case would be the examples. Then we have a whole suite of exams which assess at the workplace, and those are logbooks, portfolios, and various other workplace-based assessments such as DOPS, Mini CEX, multi-source feedback, and so on. So actually, any of these exams in all these levels can get help from electronic or digital media. In that case, all of these exams or exam types can be made e-assessment. So e-assessment can be anywhere in the Miller's pyramid. However, we all know that we are more comfortable with e-assessment, at least in the pre-COVID era, we were more comfortable with the lowest two levels of the Miller's pyramid, that is knows and knows how. We did not attempt to really make a huge impact with digitalization in the top two layers. However, we have in many a time we have used many technologies not to administer the exam but to record the assessment result, the rating, the grade of the candidates using technological media. Right. Now let's look at, I said e-assessment is using electronic or digital technologies in any of its activities in an assessment. So let's see what are these activities. And actually these activities can be illustrated as the life cycle of assessment. All these activities complete one life cycle of an exam. So we can start from the 12 o'clock position. So you have to first plan an exam, that is blueprinting. Then you have to write exam questions, that is item writing. Then you have to vet them and you have to maintain security of them until at least the exam is over, and perhaps even after the exam in certain types of exams like multiple choice questions. Then once the exam is ready, we need to set the standard or set the pass mark. Once we have done that, usually we administer the exam. Then once the exam is over, we will mark the papers. Usually in certain types of exams, we get the help of technology to mark the entire exam without any human intervention. But sometimes we may use human intervention when marking. But then after that, what is more important is evaluation and feedback. And once that is done, we may also elect to preserve some of the items or all the items, all the questions. And we call this item banking. And then this item bank can be used at least partly when planning the next exam. So this is the life cycle of an exam or an assessment. And I'm using each of these activities or each of these stages in the life cycle of an assessment. And then I am going to see two things. One is I'm going to discuss why is this stage important? What is the educational rationale behind this stage? And the second thing, I would like to discuss how digitalization, how electronic and digital technologies can help in executing each of these stages. Right. So that is my broad overview of this webinar. And after every stage, we will have a question and answer session and then move on to the next stage. Okay, so let's begin. Let's begin with blueprinting. Right. So what is blueprinting and why is it necessary? Why assessment blueprinting? Well, if you look at an exam, ideally, all that we have taught should be examined or assessed. That means the entire curriculum. But all of us know That is although it is ideally suited, it is not practical. Why is it not practical? How long is our exam? Our exams are maximally 3 hours, 4 hours, not more than that. Maybe sometimes there are exams where there are 2-3 hour sessions, meaning 6 hours. And we are going to assess how much? We are going to assess about 2-3 years at least of learning, sometimes even more than 2-3 years of learning. At least maybe even 1 year of learning. Even if it is 1 year of learning or few months of learning, how much can we assess with 3 hours? So it is a given that in any exam, however good that exam may be, we cannot assess all that we have taught. So we need to select. How do we select? That is where blueprinting comes. Now, so how blueprinting will assess this process? To understand this, let's look at the problem. Problem is we have a large curriculum and a small exam, right? So all that is there in this curriculum, we cannot stuff in at the exam. Only a few items. If the curriculum items are these red triangles, only few of these can be included in the exam, right? So then how are we going to select the few that we can be included in the exam? Let's take an analogy or an example for this. Let's think not an exam, but a research situation. Let's say that we want to find out the average blood pressure in males in Saudi Arabia. And in the entire country, the entire kingdom is our population. Now, the best way to do this is to go from house to house with a sphygmomanometer and start measuring the blood pressure of adult males, record them, then average it. That's the foolproof method. Nobody can say that the average that I get is not the average of the blood pressure of a male in Saudi Arabia, because I have covered the entire population. That is like assessing the entire curriculum. Now we know we don't have resources in research settings to cover the entire population of Saudi Arabia if we want to find out the average blood pressure in a male. So what do? We use a sample. Only a small number of, relatively small number of males we will include in our sample, measure their blood pressure, average them. And if our sample represented the population, then the average blood pressure that we get from the sample will be very close to, if not the same, even if we had measured the blood pressure of all the males in the kingdom, right? So we can apply the same principle to the exam. Then it's a matter of sampling. Selections of items for an exam would be following the principles of sampling. So if our sample, which is the exam, represents the curriculum, then we don't need to worry that we haven't assessed everything in the curriculum, because that sample represents the curriculum. Here is another example or an analogy from medical practice. We have a tumor, and of course we can remove the tumor itself, everything in the tumor, clear the tumor. But usually what happens is we want to first know, before going for surgery, whether this tumor is malignant or not. So what we do is we insert a needle, put some take in some cells from the tumor, put it on a slide, put it under microscope, and see what the cells look like, and that's our biopsy. Now, if the biopsy is the sample here, if the biopsy represents the cells in the biopsy represents the cells in the tumor, then our diagnosis will be right. However, if we have drawn in some fat cells and looked at those fat cells, then our diagnosis from the biopsy will be wrong. Similarly, if we sample properly, if we sample the curriculum properly in an exam, our diagnosis about the student's ability will be accurate and correct. But if we don't sample accurately, our diagnosis will be wrong. So that is the importance of blueprinting. So if we don't blueprint adequately and properly, we will be passing candidates who should not pass, and we will be failing candidates who should not fail. So assessment blueprinting is all about sampling. And how do we sample? Usually we use what we call a blueprint. Blueprint is something like this, where in the columns we have all the curriculum outcomes, and in rows we have all the content area. And then all these cells are the cells in the curriculum, like the triangles, the red triangles that I showed you on my previous slide. So all these cells actually need to be assessed. However, we don't have time, we don't have resources to assess all. So then we have to select. That means we have to sample. How are we going to sample? We are going to sample in such a way that each column and each row is represented adequately in our exam. So we can select items from this cell, another set of items here, and we go on until we are satisfied that all the cells, all the columns and all the rows are represented, at least one or two cells in each column and each row. As you could see, that is the case here. So in this case, we are not passing or failing a candidate, but by only assessing only a portion of the curriculum, only a part of the curriculum. But we are assessing the curriculum comprehensively and widely and broadly before deciding whether a candidate should pass or fail. Now that's the principle, that's what we do. And what we do is we create this sort of a blueprint using pencil and paper, or we may use an Excel sheet or some computer device. But the process is essentially face to face, where all the examiners come and then try to decide which are the cells that should be included in the curriculum. However, that process can be digitalized, and there are digital software also which use it. Now, the examples, most of the examples that I show you here is from a software that we have developed on our own. I know there are many software in the world, which are very expensive also. But all those software give certain facilities, but they don't give the facilities to fulfill all the activities in that assessment cycle. So what we did was, we developed a software which we also did not cover all the activities, but we covered activities which usually ordinary software do not give. So even assessment blueprinting until very recently, assessment software did not give, but now they give. But it's quite easy to create a blueprint using a software, where then the people who decide can be remote, need not talk to each other, can share the screen like this and then select from an item bank different items. Now, how to do that? Here is the example software. I don't know whether you can see it, but definitely I will take you through. So this is a module or a course unit that we assess, cardiovascular system. And then we can select what are the topics we want, what are the body systems, what are the content areas, what are the outcomes, and what stage in the human life cycle that the exam question is about. And we can also select on different disciplines and then search for items. When we click search, I will get all the items according to my selection to this portion of the screen, and then I can select. I can either select all or I can select. And when I'm selecting, this software will also give me some parameters, important parameters to judge whether this is the appropriate item that should include in the exam. And then once I select, I can go here and view the blueprint. When I click here, I will get the blueprint. When I click here, I will get the blueprint like this. So this blueprint is, nobody created it. The software created it. We only selected the items. And this blueprint will additionally, so the columns are the outcomes, learning outcomes. These can be, in your case, these can be, this software can be customized. So if I don't want these outcomes, I can create another set of outcomes. Maybe Saudi Med's outcomes I can use. And also these rows can be changed. These are all topics or lessons. And then you see a small column here and a small row here that gives me also the totals. So altogether I have 7 questions, and out of that 2 represents this row, 3 represents this row. Of course, this is not a complete blueprint. I have only given it as because we had only 7 items, so we cannot prepare with 7 items a blueprint that covers the entire curriculum. But for illustration purposes, this total subtotal gives me a feeling how much is this row represented in my exam. Similarly, how much is this column represented in my exam, and those are very useful for me to get an idea of the relative balance of the exam. Also, if I want, I can click this item. When I click this item, I will get what that item is about, so that I know, okay, I have selected the right item. Right? So let me click one of these items and you will see what will happen. Right? If I click this, what will happen is I will get the entire, in another window, I will get the entire question. So that this question, the options, the stem, the leading, everything else, everything will be there. Then I can make a judgment, and then I can close it, and I can click another one to see whether this question is appropriate to represent this cell, right? So we can do that as much as we want. We can play around it. We can remove an item, include another item until we get the blueprint right, so that our curriculum, our exam will represent the curriculum that we are going to assess. So this is a good facility and a very useful facility, rather than trying to draw up a blueprint or even draw up on Excel. Even that you can't click an item and see whether what that item is. All those facilities will be not there, and these column totals and row totals will not be there. So using an electronic software, a purpose-made, tailor-made software for blueprinting helps immensely. Right. So that's about the first stage of the assessment cycle, that is blueprinting. And do you have any questions or answers? I'm sure you would have posted some questions. In that case, I think Dr. Lubna or Dr. Seema will help me to read out those questions.
Thank you, Dr. Gomenda. I'm Dr. Seema, Assistant Professor of Critical Care and Nursing in the College of Nursing. I will be addressing some of your questions along with Dr. Lubna. Thank you for a phenomenal illustration of the assessment blueprinting. And we have one question from the audience. How can we purchase, how can he get those softwares for blueprinting, if you can address that.
Oh, all right. So I know, as I told you, there are many software on the market, and some of those software will give you the facility for blueprinting. At least I know one or two, which will give you the facility. Of course, these software vendors are very in a way business minded. What they will give is, they will, like any other software vendor, they will give some basic facilities first, and for every other facility that you want, they will charge you. But there will be the facility will be there. So that's not a big deal. If you email me or if you contact me, I can give you some of the names of vendors. Of course, the other way is, if you don't want to spend that amount of money, large sums of money, year after year after year, you can, with little bit of expertise in assessment and in computer technology, it's not difficult to develop your own. Of course, when I say not difficult, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's worth doing it. That's what we did, because at the time we developed this, even blueprinting was not there in software, available software. And so we started developing it. Of course, as any software, you develop on the go. That's why even Microsoft Word, let's say, it's not the version in 2003 that we are using in 2020, because they have keep on improving. Similarly, any software will need to improve, but it's good to make a start. Then you have more control over your data. Otherwise, you will have to depend on some vendor to do anything, even to retrieve the data. I know some institutes, even to retrieve the data, they need the vendors' help. So that is not very good. So best would be start getting some IT and educational help, assessment help, and start small. You can keep on adding. Even if your software only did the blueprinting part, that's fine to start with, but you can keep on developing it. So if you want a real list of software vendors or software which are available, you can definitely contact me. I don't have the list at the moment, but I can definitely, help you out in that.
Thank you, I appreciate it. No further questions for this section.
Thank you. So let's move on to the second stage. That is, when we have selected what should be included in the exam, we have to create those exam items. That means we have to write the questions, or develop the OSCE stations, or develop other material which would be used in the exam. And those items should match with the cells in the blueprint that we have created, we have identified. However, most of the time, if you have a good item banking system, you will write afresh only a few of the questions. Others you will take from the bank. So we will also look at how we can do that, and I'm sure most of you will be having that facility. We are taking items from the bank and including it in the exam. But however, you should not take all the items from the bank. One reason is you will run out of the bank. After few years, students will have the entire bank, student will know what is being asked and so on. Another reason is you are not updating the bank then. You are just using the bank. So after some time, bank will become bankrupt. Right? Bank will become obsolete. So for that reason, you should also include new items to the bank. And for that reason, we should write more questions. More questions we have better sampling ability for the blueprint. Little questions we can't sample much. That's not going to work. And also, more questions you have, your curriculum will be more represented. Right? So we have to write questions, at least partly. Partly it can be replenished from the item bank. Right. So let's look at why we should write questions. Well, when we are writing a question, we write it to measure the candidate ability. That measure may be a skill such as an OSCE station, or maybe a written question knowledge. So these questions are really our measuring tools. Like when we measure length of a table, we use a measuring tape. Similarly, when we measure an ability of a candidate, we measure with that question, with the question we write. So if the measuring tool is inaccurate, then the test result will be invalid. Validity is whether we are assessing what we want. If we are assessing what we want, then we say it's valid. Now, if a particular question is not assessing what we want, but something else, then the test result also to that extent will be invalid. Now, to write valid questions, questions which are flawless, which don't have any errors, you need to follow and strictly follow item writing guides. There are many item writing guides for different types of questions. There are item writing guides for OSCE stations, there are item writing guides for MCQ questions, and so on. And you need to follow them. You need to follow them to the letter. But unfortunately, these item writing guides are very long. There is considerable amount of information in those item writing guides. Those guides will say you should do this, you should not do this. So do's and don'ts will be given in detail in those guides, and it's very difficult to keep in one's head all this information. So if you look at an item writing guide, this is an item writing guide, the examiner's manual from the Royal Colleges of Surgeons in the UK, the intercollegiate exam. And this is an MCQ writing guide. So you would see there are some do's, some don'ts. Now, if we are writing by hand without the assistance of any software, what will happen is we have to go through this guide question by question. Before writing a question, we have to refresh our memory, and then once we have written our question, we have to see whether we have not done any of these don'ts. These don'ts are about possible question flaws or possible mistakes that happen, like whether we are giving any clue in the stem of the MCQ, so that a candidate who doesn't know can select the right answer. So now that is a flawed MCQ. And we need to check whether the MCQs and other exam items that we write will be having any of these flaws. Now, these flaws are very, very extensive, and actually we conduct workshops, entire workshops. Sometimes the workshop lasts entire day, sometimes half a day, to inform the examiners how to follow these guides and how to write good exam questions. And I was just informed now, I think tomorrow there is such an item writing workshop, electronic workshop again, at King South University, done by the Assessment and Evaluation Center by two experienced facilitators. So similarly, there are many item writing workshops now that is to update yourself. But the unfortunate thing is, even after learning, you have to refer to these all the time when you write. But if we have a good software which will guide you, whenever you do a mistake, it pops up a message and saying, look, you are doing this. That would be very easy. Then we need not have all this information in our brain, in our memory, right? So the same exam software that we use, we can there is a facility to do this. So again, if I want to write a question on cardiovascular system, okay, I can select the module. Then it gives me a number, but I can change this number if I want. Then what are the body systems addressed in this question? I can select, because all these will be good information for blueprinting. So we need to select them. Then what is the topic? In this case, it's valvular heart disease. Then there are learning outcomes, the faculty learning outcomes, the national qualification learning outcomes. Then I can write the individual module outcomes also. That I cannot select unless, of course, I have also uploaded the module outcomes. We usually don't. Also the lesson outcomes we don't, but the examiner can copy and paste those from the curriculum. And then if you want to know whether this question is about a neonate, an infant, a child, an adolescent, or an adult, or from a person from a geriatric group, then I can select that. Then the disciplines, whether it's anatomy, physiology, what sort of the disciplines, then I can click proceed. And when I proceed, what happens is I have a ignore this warning for the moment. Warning is a little, will come a little late, but I will have this facility where I can include the stem, I can include the lead-in, I can include the options. Options are not all included here because for lack of space. You can see option A. So A, B, C, D, E, there will be. Now when I do that, if I have made a mistake according to that exam writing guide, I will get a warning. Here, this says there is a word repetition in the stem and in the option. Now sometimes you don't need to do anything. You can just, if you look at that and it's not very harmful, the examiner can decide, okay, I'm not going to do anything. But there are certain errors or certain guidelines which you cannot violate. Those things, if you have done such a thing, then you can't click OK and go. It will stop it until you correct that. So this sort of warning, this is only one example. So all those guidelines, if violated, there will be a warning. So that makes your task as the examiner, question writer, that much easier, because then you need not worry about keeping everything in the head and checking every time whether when an exam item is written. You don't need to do that, because I get that information from the system and I am corrected by the system. So that to me is a very beneficial thing. But at the moment, even now, as far as I know, there is no commercial software that does it. That's why actually we developed this, because most of the time our examiners are very stressed to follow these guidelines, because they have to, I mean, they are not full-time in medical education or health professions education. They sometimes are clinicians. So they cannot remember all these. There are other things that they need to remember. So why not give the remembering part and the flaw detection part, the mistake detection part, to a software? Then it makes our lives that much easier. So that is one of the very good uses of e-assessment. Right. Now, once I have cleared all these warnings, either I have done something, because some warnings will not allow you to proceed, because those are fundamental mistakes. Then maybe if you have included only 2 options out of 5, they will not allow you to move. If you have not written a lead-in, they will not allow you to move. So those are fundamental mistakes. They will not allow you to move. But certain other things are just warnings so that you are alerted. Look, there is a problem like this. See whether this problem is real. Because certain things you can't help. Sometimes there are, although the computer thinks that it's a word repeat, it's not really a word repeat. Or that word repeat will have to be there. Otherwise, you can't write the question. In that case, you can overwrite it. Right. Once I have done all this, I can say proceed, and then I will also be asked to fill this when I proceed. What is that? I will be asked, so these are written exams, MCQs, so cognitive level. So as you can see, this is Bloom's taxonomy categorized into 3 categories. So recall comprehension is one, application analysis is another, and synthesis evaluation is another. So I think the question that I wrote is synthesis evaluation. So I have clicked this, and they also asked me from the writer, what is the difficulty level? Now that's a guess. That's a guess of the writer. So I think it's moderately difficult. And then either I can go back to the earlier stage or back to the basic one, or I can continue. So if I continue, after these 4 stages, I have written the question. Now, when you write with a software like this, because you don't need to spend time on referring to guidelines, the writing speed becomes much faster because you just need to type, that's all. Think and type. Others will be corrected, auto-corrected. Auto-corrected means auto-alerted for you to correct. And then when I continue, it's not still over. The software will want me to check again some of the key things. So I am being asked to revisit my question and say whether I have done this. Does the MCQ assess an important concept from the blueprint? If yes, I can take this. Then is the information in the stem is the scenario, just sufficient to ask the to answer the leading? So then again I can go back and say, okay, I'm rechecking. Computer is asking me to recheck. So that I will not make a mistake. Are all the options homogeneous? I am being asked by the computer to visit again. I know you wrote it, I know you checked it, but see it again. And have the stem lead in options coherent and consistent and using consistent terminology. Again, I can tick. Is the MCQ, that is the stem lead in and options, devoid of any technical item flaws that would lead to candidates guessing the right answer? Again, I have to check. These technical flaws, most of these, the computer has already checked, but it wants me also to just to run my eyes through the question once more before I submit. And then this is the cover test. Can the MCQ be answered only reading the stem and the leading? So that is something very important, the cover test. So computer is asking me to do that. Otherwise, what happens? We write questions and we forget about all this. Now, computer is reminding me, do it, and click. If all have been clicked, I will be allowed to save and submit. If these have not been clicked, checked and clicked, I will not be allowed to submit. So in other words, computer is guiding me, software is guiding me, so that during the time of exam preparation and during the time of the exam committee meeting, we will have less work, because the exam committee, the vetting of questions and all that, partly the computer has done. So that makes our life much easier, and that's what e-assessment, we would like e-assessment to do, because e-assessment should help us to run an exam validly, reliably and efficiently. Right. So once that is done, then the question is submitted through the system. Now what we would do is we would write a question and either physically take it to the chief examiner, or we will have to send it by email. Now here it's not like that, just you can submit it, and also in this system you can view the questions that you have submitted, no issue. So there is a record of the questions that one has written also. Right. That's about how e-assessment help you to write exam questions. Are there questions that need answers?
So far, we have no
Oh, great.
questions.
Okay.
I would like to ask the audience if they have any questions to write them down right now. Actually, Professor, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So once these questions are already in the system, as you mentioned, there are some errors that are that will not allow you to move on, but there are some that are just warnings.
Yes.
And they may be misjudged by maybe a faculty with less experience in item writing. So how often do you go ahead as a school and or as a college and review your question bank and review the questions within the question? Do you do that at all?
Oh yeah. Now when an examiner writes a question and submits, it doesn't get absorbed to the bank automatically. It will go to the bank and it will be in a special place in the bank. These are unvetted questions. So then the chief examiner or the exam committee will have to go through these and then approve these. Then only that they will go to the bank, the proper bank. Otherwise, they are stored in a place, in a waiting room, if you like, until the chief examiner or the exam committee vets it, goes through it, and then the exam committee will have to go through it and then say, okay, approve. If not, exam committee themselves can make changes, edit the question.
Okay.
Or you can ask, you can send it back to the examiner and ask them to resubmit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that part will be, I will be talking, I think, in the next stage. Okay, the next stage is item security and actually scrutiny also, meaning to assess whether the question that was written is appropriate. So for that, why should you do that? First, let's look at why. If the assessment is insecure, then I mean, if there is a leak in the exam before the exam, then that may offer undue advantage to some candidates. So what we write as exam questions should be confidential at least until the exam is over. In the case of MCQs, even beyond that, because we are going to reuse some other good items that we write. And that is not good. Why? Then the exam results may not reflect the true ability of the candidate, because some of the candidates have already got through some other means what will be assessed. And since we are not assessing the entire curriculum, since we are assessing only the sample, the little that we assess, if the candidates have got to know beforehand and they have prepared for those, then the result will not reflect the true ability of the candidate. This will again adversely affect the validity of the assessment, because the result we say is valid because it reflects the true ability of the candidate. But if that doesn't happen, then we cannot say, then we will be passing people who should not pass and we will be failing people who should not fail. So that is, then the exam result is not valid. More importantly, if this happens over and over again, the stakeholders may lose confidence and the trust in the assessment. They will not consider this assessment then useful. Oh, that exam, people know what is going to be asked at that exam, so that is not a true reflection of the ability, so we will ignore it. And that will be very damaging to the institution. An untrusted exam will lead to loss of credibility of the institution that offers the exam, and ultimately that institution, nobody will care. Sometimes that institution will not be allowed to carry out exams anymore because their exams do not have proper security guidelines. So any exam question that we write, we need to follow proper security measures so that only the people who should see the question before it is administered, that is the question writer, the chief examiner, the examination committee, only those will be seeing that question. So for that, especially in terms of, this is a real issue in e-assessment because we know there are hackers, right? So if a hacker can get into the system, then it's a problem. Then sometimes the entire bank may be out. Then a bank that you have collected and preserved for many, many years can be in unauthorized hands within few seconds. And all the effort that you have taken over the years will be of no use anymore. So exam security, especially in terms of e-assessment, not only e-assessment, these things can go wrong even in hard copy exams. But if hard copy exams, if something happens, only that paper, only a few questions will be, you will be losing. But if this happens to a exam software where an entire item bank is there, then the results will be very drastic and sometimes unbearable. So we need to have a lot of checks and balances, especially in e-assessment. So one of the ways is that now there are in the system that I am explaining, and also I know in many good assessment e-assessment software, exam software, everybody cannot access everything. So an administrator will have a special password and he can only do certain things. Examiners can also do only certain things with his password or her password. Basically, he can access only the questions that he wrote. He cannot access anything else. Similarly, different examiners will have access to what they wrote, their contribution. Chief examiner can access, so there is another password for chief examiner, all unique passwords. I mean, if there are 3 chief examiners for 3 exams, they will have 3 different passwords, but their password, the computer will, or the software will recognize as a chief examiner. And then he has access to, within that question, exam only, within that exam, within that blueprint, all the questions, not the entire bank. Exam panel will also have that facility, and exam panel also will have the facility to select from according to a blueprint. If there are maybe related to that exam, if there are 200 questions and if your paper is only 100 questions, then according to that blueprint, the exam panel will have the facility to select. And of course, some administrator will be able to either print or deliver it online, right? So this is a typical login where there is a username, password, and then with the password, I can't just go in. I should get a pin, and when I press the pin according to this password to the relevant person, the computer, the system will send an email. An email will have a pin number like this. So there is a pin number given to the email, and then when I only there will be a box to insert my pin, then only I will find access to the system. So this is similar to banking software, what they call this two-factor double encryption, so that we don't lose questions unnecessarily. Right, then this is what I told you. This is partly the question, the answer to the question that I think somebody made earlier. So now look, this question, the first question, it's still pending, meaning the chief examiner has not approved it. Others are approved, that's why it's active. So I can select what if I log in as chief examiner, I can select, I can see only the rejected questions, only the removed questions, only the questions pending approval, depending on how I tick. If I want to see all, I will click all and then search. Then I will get everything from the bank. And if there are things pending, I can view it with this, I can edit with this, I can delete with this. Deleted ones will go here, removed ones, right? So I can edit also because I'm having that facility. I'm an exam panel member and a chief examiner. But an ordinary examiner will not have this facility. When I only approve, that this will be active. Otherwise, I can't use this. Pending ones, I can't use this for an exam. They are still in the waiting room. So how to approve? If I go to that panel, want to approve, well, pending one, I have only one. If I click this, I will get the entire question like this. And then I can either reject or approve. So I'm going to approve here, or I can reject. So again, the things that we used to do face to face can be facilitated. Of course, with the software also, if you want, you can come face to face and do this. But we can also, if all of us log in at the same time to the system, we can see the questions and then we can discuss online or over the phone or whatever, and then take decisions. More importantly, more than whether it's face to face or online, this sort of a system will keep a record of what we did, the changes we did, what we asked. So there is a history of the item is maintained, and that's quite useful. And also there is a remark column further down. The examiner, the chief examiner and the examiner panel can give reasons. Why did they do this? So those remarks also will be saved. So those are very, very important because this will improve the quality of the questions and the quality of the exam. And so that the exams will be more valid and more reliable. Right, that's about security and also ensuring the quality of the questions. Any questions and answers?
A very important topic. We do have a Al-Taqim system for question banking, and we have similar features and many lessons to learn as well. I urge the faculty to make use of it and enter their questions, and they can see the similar process to this one with pending. Yeah. And I will also remind the audience to post questions about this topic if they have any issues. We have one question that in general addresses e-assessment. How e-assessment can help in balancing number of questions to cover knowledge, skills, and ability?
Right, so the answer is blueprint. The blueprint, as I showed you, I think a little bit earlier, will give the subtotals of, let me go there, this will give the subtotals. Then we will know this row, this number of questions which cover this number of columns. That will give us an idea, and then we will know, is this column, is this row over represented or underrepresented? Is this column overrepresented or underrepresented? Now that is mainly done as a committee to see whether as a group they agree that this is the right balance, this is the right number of questions. The bare minimum will be it has to cover all the rows and all the columns, at least one question per row and per column, but some columns will have to be represented more because they are more important. Maybe the curriculum has spent more time on that because they are important, or they may be life-threatening questions. If you miss it, you will lose a life. In that case, yes, such columns and such rows may also be overrepresented. It's not actually overrepresented, it's populating more questions because it's more important. So it's a group decision. Of course, in blueprinting, we are talking about content validity. So there are various indices like content validity indices. Those indices are, that is just number of people who agree that these two questions should be in this cell. Usually, if in an exam panel, if 80% people agree, we think that CVI or content validity index is good. Similarly, we can generate a content validity index for each of these questions. And when you do that, you will have to click like this, you will have to click and then see the question, because otherwise you can't just with a number, you can't really decide anything. So that's how we can really decide how many questions will we need. Okay.
Thank you for going back to emphasize blueprinting. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So what we have done so far is we are at this stage where we have gone through various security measures and to ensure security, as well as various measures to ensure quality, both quality and security. Now let us move to the next stage, that is standard setting. Okay, we have blueprinted. According to the blueprinted, we have selected items and written items. And written items, we have ensured security and quality both. Now the exam paper is more or less ready, but we need to find out what is the pass mark. Usually in a written exam, we do it before the exam. In skills exams, some times we do it after the exam, but sometimes still we do it before the exam. So what are the methods available for standard setting, and why should we do standard setting? Well, the two most important reasons for standard setting, one is patient safety. What does that mean? Will the pass mark allow incompetent or unsafe candidates to be licensed? In that case, it is catastrophic. Why? Then there will be a licensed practitioner who will put the patient's life in danger, maybe even kill patients. So that is a real issue. So therefore, we cannot allow such a candidate to pass the exam. So whether he passes or fails will depend on the pass mark. That's why the pass mark is important. Then the second question is about the fairness of the assessment to the candidate. Now, if I sit this year and I get more than 50% and I pass, and then next year another candidate sits same ability as I am, but the question paper is much more difficult. In that case, that candidate will fail, but both of us had the same ability. So will a candidate be disadvantaged merely because they sat in a particular year, a particular version of the exam with a particular cohort? Then it's trouble. So therefore, we should ensure year on year that we pass candidates of similar ability. Similarly, whether I am sitting the exam with a good group of candidates, or whether I am sitting an exam with a not so good group of candidates, should not determine whether I pass or fail. So my passing or failure should entirely be dependent on my ability and ability alone. So what are the standard setting methods available? Well, we are talking about summative exams, which are used for licensing, or these are the exams which we want to be used for passing and failing. Passing and failing based on the ability of the candidate. Then there are criterion reference methods, non-reference methods, and compromise methods. Criterion reference methods has two: test centered and examinee centered, and there are a whole lot of different methods. All these can be used in different ways to set the standard or set the pass mark. So first we need to decide whether we are using criterion reference, norm reference, or compromise. Criterion reference is the method that we use for summative exams that we want to test, or that we want to know the ability of the candidate, the real ability of the candidate. These are the tests that we use to pass or fail a candidate and to issue an award or a license to practice. Now, norm referencing is not like that. You sit with a cohort of candidates, and if you come within the first 10% or 20% within that cohort of candidates, you pass. So that 10% or 20% is not related to my ability or to any candidate's ability. That's only related to the ability of the entire cohort. If I am sitting an exam with a very lousy group of candidates, very poor group of candidates, even with less knowledge and less ability, I will pass. If I sit with a very able group of candidates, then I have to have a lot of ability to pass. But that lot of ability may be much more than what I need actually to practice. So norm referencing we don't really use for summative ability based exams, but we use for selection exams. Then there are compromise methods. Now I know there are software to process. Of course, I mean, this is only processing, using software to process. Still the decision is with the examiners, not with anybody else. To process or conduct these sessions of standard setting, you can get the help of software. And there are, of course, there is no package which will give all these methods for you to run. But maybe something like Angoff, which is very common, I think more software will have. Now, once we decide the pass mark, we can decide whether to set a pass mark for each item or for the entire exam. So we need to first decide whether it's criterion referenced or norm reference or compromised. If it is criterion reference, we need to decide whether it's test centered or examiner centered, and then we need to go for the individual method. Now, these decisions are human decisions. They are not being even assisted by a computer or a software. But once we decide, okay, we are going to run Angoff, then again, the estimates are examiner estimates. Computer cannot generate. I mean, there are computers that generate, but I don't think we have advanced to that stage. If we want the computer to generate the estimates also, we have to have much more artificial intelligence than we have today. So I would say it's not still even thought of that level, but software can be used to run the standard setting process in a hassleless way. Otherwise, it's very troublesome sometimes. So all these can be, then once you can set the pass mark for each exam item, exam question, or for the entire paper, and that is compensatory standards. If you set for each question, then it's conjunctive standard. Now, this is an overview of standard setting methods. Now, how can we make a software or e-assessment assist us in this process? Well, let's take one of the easiest and one of the most widely used, that is Angoff. Now, it's very easy to set up. This is the original blueprint. We can set up a paper or a grid like this. What you see here, right? This is the same blueprint. Instead of the blueprint, you can set up the same table like this, where the columns are the examiners, rows are the different questions. Then each examiner will identify its estimates and include in the software. Then automatically the total probability and the examiner mean is covered, and then automatically the pass mark will be decided. So this will be quite trouble-free. Otherwise, you will have to collect from each and every examiner all the probabilities and then work out maybe even work out by hand the total probability and the mean examiner probability. Now that can be avoided with this sort of software, and I know a fair number of exam software will give you this facility. That is not a big deal. These are fairly available, but these exam software vendors do not give these facilities with the basic payment. These are modules that we will have to purchase as you go along, usually. Why is it easy is that otherwise, now, I mean, I have simplified the Angoff process. Angoff process is a little bit more complicated, especially modified Angoff, where we ask sometimes the examiners to discuss and if necessary change their probabilities. In that case, you don't need to recollect the change probabilities, the examiner themselves can include. And also, you can do this online then. You don't need to meet. If I am the examiner one, I can include my and then log off. That will be saved. Then another person will meet, log in tonight and include this. So then the chief examiner and the exam panel can see, okay, everyone has given its input and this is the pass mark. And then of course, once everyone has given, you will further give time for them to change, discuss and change if necessary. So you can do this remotely, also with the use of a software. Right.
So I think there was an issue with Dr. Gominda's side with the connection. So the moderators and Dr. Ramayan, would you like to say something before he joins? I think he's back. He's back. Dr. Gominda, you're on mute. You're on mute, Doctor.
Now it's okay.
Yeah, you're okay, but your presentation is not shared. Yeah. Kindly share.
Correct. I will share.
Now it's okay. Thank you.
You can see the presentation, right?
Yes, Dr. Gominda.
Yeah. So I don't know what happened when I clicked next. It just went out of my screen. Okay. Okay. So this is Angoff. Now this is Angoff. Similarly, you may be able to. I know there are software to run borderline group methods and borderline regression methods. At least, and I know there may be software. I think I have seen one for Hofstee. Others I don't know, but Angoff is the commonest. I think that facility will be there in most exam software. Right, Q&A. Questions and answers.
So we don't have any at the moment.
Yeah.
So maybe we should just go ahead.
I mean, if there's any, we can also take questions at the very end also.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Right. So let's move on to the next stage, and that is exam administration. Now, professionalism in exam administration. Why is it necessary? All the planning and all the hard work that we have done so far in our life cycle of the exam will go waste if the exam is not administered properly. Poorly administered assessment will not offer a fair chance on equal opportunities to candidates. So if a fair chance is not offered to all candidates, this is especially so in e-assessment. I mean, in face-to-face assessment, everybody comes to a hall. So we know that everybody is having the same opportunity and a fair chance. So equity is maintained that way. But if the candidate is taking the exam online at home, from home, then we don't know the home situation. Then we don't know the internet connection. As just now happened, something can go wrong and they will be out of the exam, maybe for a considerable time. Fortunately, that did not happen a few minutes ago, but that can happen. So that is a major concern. So in short, poorly administered assessment will offer undue advantage to some candidates, and then some good candidates may score poorly and some not so good candidates will may pass the exam sometimes. This will have an adverse effect on both validity and reliability of assessment. So after doing all this hard work, the test administration part will have to be done flawlessly. And for that, we can get technology help. However, we need to be very, very careful because technology is not a good master. Technology is a good servant, but not a good master. So you cannot leave everything to technology. You have to check, double check, recheck, and try to prevent mishaps. So what are the measures that we can take to minimize exam administration flaws in e-assessment? Right. So one, in terms of creation of the exam, we can, as you saw this, we can select items, we can add to paper, and then we can create exam, and that has two options. Either we can print or we can put it on a screen. Right? So that is creation of. Once we have created, then when the candidates access it, and if it is remote, the candidates should not be able to refer to any other material unless it is an open book exam. If it is open book exam, then it's fine. But if it is not an open book exam, then we should have the same security measures that we have in an exam hall, in a physical exam hall, right? How to do that? So you add the paper and then create the exam, but more important would be the delivery part. So two-factor login is a must. That is, it's not only the password and a PIN like for this software. I mean the one that I showed you. Then freezing the device on other sites. You can't go to Google and find the answer and write the answer. Access restrictions, meaning only once you log in, nothing else in the computer can be accessed. Of course, that alone does not solve the problem because the candidate can have another computer to go to Google. So that is one way only of ensuring. Then timing, progress bar, go back function, plus or minus. I have said minus or plus go back function because, but timing display is a must because when I'm doing an exam as a candidate, I should see how much time is remaining. And the progress bar will tell me, okay, I have completed half. Those are useful functions. This go back facility, sometimes in certain types of exams, you don't want the candidate to go back and correct a mistake that they have made, especially if you have given further information in that exam question later, because with that information, candidate can correct himself. We don't want, if we don't want that happening, then this go back function will have to also there. But more importantly, now actual proctoring and invigilation supervision you can't happen. So there are online proctoring systems with identity checking. So that, I mean, there will be 360-degree camera. But with all that, there should be somebody in the center monitoring them. Otherwise, the cameras themselves will not pick up impersonations and that sort of thing. Then plagiarism checking and all that will have to be there. Finally, no plagiarism checking software, of course they are very helpful, they alone will not work unless we have this. That is why I have included in red. That is the most important thing. That this happens before item administration. That is quality of higher order testing questions. Now, even if the candidate has access to other books or websites, it doesn't matter if the exam quality, the question is such that you can refer 100 books, but you will not get the answer. Answer will have to be worked out. That is the type of questions that you need to set in online exams. Because all these things that we said, online proctoring, plagiarism checks, identity checks, about every 10 candidates, there should be in the control room a person watching them, whether they are talking to somebody else, whether they are taking a phone call, all that will have to be monitored. But all that can be only monitored even with a 360-degree camera to an extent. People who want to cheat still may be able to cheat, but what will prevent them from cheating would be this quality of the question. That's why the second step, item writing, is very important. It's unfortunate we don't have commercial software for that, because that's where the quality comes. That's the best measure that you can take to avoid plagiarism, copying, and impersonations, that sort of thing. However, the other things need to be there. I mean, two-factor login, these are standard things. Freezing the device, 360-degree camera with online proctoring. Of course, these are expensive. I mean, human resources are needed because you can't proctor online more than 10, 15 students. So there should be every 10, 15 students, there should be a proctor watching the screen. The screen will be displaying candidates from taking the test from home. So all that will have to be there. Okay, question and answer.
Okay, so we've got one question that's
Right.
asking,
Yep.
In comparison to in-person exams, how valid, reliable, and safe do you think online exams are, especially with the COVID-19 situation?
Right. That will depend on the type of the question exam. Now, written exams, I think, with all the measures that I mentioned, can be delivered online. Now, when it comes to clinical exams and practical exams, again, with all the measures that I mentioned just now, I think certain parts you can administer. For example, history taking. History taking can be standardized. Of course, there will have to be either a simulated patient, which is a software itself, something like a robotic simulated patient, or the simulated patient can be in a central place answering the questions in the history that the candidate asks. That can happen, and examiner can watch the process and mark. So history taking may not be that much of a problem. But physical examination, it's, I mean, to the same extent that you would do in a face-to-face exam, it's impossible. Because you can't, I mean, you have to meet the patient, put your hand onto the patient to elicit signs. That cannot happen. There are certain improvisations. For example, I mean, let's say if you want to only check, these are not final exams, these are like third year exams. If you want to only check the process of physical examination, then you can ask somebody from home, a volunteer from home, to volunteer and then put your camera on and then show us how you physically examine the abdomen, for example, or auscultate the heart. That is possible, but that is very limited in scope, because I don't think that everybody will be able to find a person with a mitral valve murmur, or a diastolic murmur, or a systolic murmur from home. So you can't, for physical signs you cannot, but maybe examination of the normal can be done with the camera on with a volunteer from home. That is the best that I can think of about COVID-19. I know many institutes would do this, would ask, because I mean in COVID-19 there are maximum number of people who can gather together. Usually internationally it's 50. Anything more than any place cannot accommodate more than 50, and to accommodate a group of 50 people, the original capacity should be double that, meaning 100. Those are the COVID-19, I mean, normal international standards. So that there is social distancing. So what many medical schools did in the world is that they broke the batch into 50 groups of 50 and brought them into a simulation center and ran the clinical exam. However, having said that, there is another thing which can be used. Now you can't do that if you haven't done that, but pre-COVID, especially those developed institutes who have proper workplace-based assessment with a proper system to record, those institutes had all the information regarding the abilities of the candidate in their system. So with a compromised exam, maybe only a written exam with some clinical scenarios, all clinical scenario exam, you can then pass or fail a candidate with that exam plus the information they have. So the learning point here that we have to take to heart is that in future there may be other lockdowns. There will be other COVID-19s, other coronaviruses affecting us. In that case, during the time that we do face-to-face workplace-based assessment, if we have a good workplace-based assessment system where all the gradings are collected online, stored online, securely, then when a lockdown comes, we have at least part of the information. At least the information we have about physical examination and hands-on practical skills can be picked up from there. Then we can do a knowledge test with some clinical relevance, with clinical scenarios, and then pass or fail a candidate. So for that, when the situation improves, we have to prepare from the day that we start again face-to-face work. Okay.
Sure. Thank you very much. There was one more question asking about specific thoughts regarding OSPI and OSCE exams from a distance.
Yeah, I mean OSPIs, I think most of the OSPIs can, because OSPIs usually those are objective structured practical exams. Those do not involve a patient. Those involve only clinical material and clinical equipment. So those can be run online. I mean, you can project an X-ray, you can project an ultrasound scan. Those things are possible on screen. But OSCEs, which are clinical exams, history taking part, with difficulty you can do. But physical examination part, I think best is to rely on the workplace-based physical examination marks. That is, if you have collected it before the lockdown, because during the lockdown anyway you can't. So the take-home message again is prepare a good workplace-based assessment system. Though that information will be very useful in a future lockdown.
Thank you very much. That was very clear.
Yep, thank you. Let's move on. Right, this is a big part. Most of the exam software at the very beginning actually concentrated on this evaluation and feedback, especially evaluation, because most software were developed to analyze items and to bank items. These other parts were not part of the software. Even now, most software do not offer these. Standard settings, some software has adjunct adjunct packages they offer. Blueprinting, some they offer. Item writing, nobody offers. So, but e-assessment, electronic media, software packages can help on all those. So evaluation is one of the favorite things of software. So let's see why evaluation is needed. And let's also see why feedback is needed. Well, why exam evaluation? After an item is developed, it needs to be tested in actual practice to find out whether it has served the purpose. Whether it has served the purpose, one word for that is validity. Validity is asking whether the exam delivered the information that we wanted. So we write a question and then we don't know whether the question will really do what we want it to do. So we have to wait until the exam is over and then see whether it has worked. We evaluate an assessment to check whether the exam item and the exam as a whole has served their purpose. So common tools to evaluate the worth of an item are difficulty index. Difficulty index is simply the proportion of candidates answering an item correctly. Then the discrimination index, that is the difference between the highest scoring proportion, difference between the proportions of highest scoring and the lowest scoring candidates answering an item correctly. I will show you the equation a little while later. So basically you are thinking, you are assuming that your good students will get most of the time a question right, your bad students will get most of the time the same question wrong. So we are seeing whether this question can differentiate between good students and bad students. So then what we do is we find out the proportion of the candidates from the good group who got the question right. And then we also see the proportion of the candidates from the bad group who got the question right. And the difference is the discrimination index. Then the reliability, crudely put, it's a measure of reproducibility. But actually how that reproducibility comes is by minimizing error. So reliability is a measure of error freeness, that is, it's free of error. Okay, so these are the basic indices, and almost all of the exam software will give these. These are very easy to calculate. So difficulty is this, number of candidates answering the question and the total number of candidates. Some people call it p-value, or some people call it facility index. Discrimination index is the proportion of candidates correctly answering in the upper 1/3 of the batch. Proportion of candidates correctly answering the same question in the lower 1/3 of the batch. The difference between the two is the discrimination index. There is another calculation called point by serial, which is very similar to discrimination index. That is a correlation between the question statistic and the total statistic. That is how a candidate has answered a question, the mark that the candidate has got for a question versus his total mark. So total item correlations. Total item correlations are being calculated in the point by serial. But I mean, these are, you don't need to know how these are calculated or whatever, especially in this e-assessment era. However, what you need to know is how to interpret them, because the computer or the software package will not interpret to you, at least the present day computer packages will not interpret for you the results. Then alpha reliability is if an exam is measuring a given ability, or what we call a construct, how well do all items within that exam measure this ability. So we think that an exam should assess one ability, maybe knowledge, application of knowledge, communication skills, and so on. In that case, that particular ability, let's say communication skills, how much do all the items assess communication skills? That is what you measure by reliability. Usually reliability is 0 to 1 and 0.8 is considered acceptable reliability. This is for the entire exam, for all the items. For individual items, we can measure what we call alpha if deleted. That is, we take out from the exam the mark for that particular item and recalculate reliability and see whether the reliability has gone up or gone down. If the reliability has gone up, that means the item that I took out is a bad item because that has pulled down reliability. So these are standard indices. You don't need to be worried about how these are calculated and so on. But as I said, we need to interpret. So interpretation of alpha reliabilities, whether it's above 0.8 or below 0.8. I mean, even below 0.8, 0.75, 0.7, especially for an OSCE type exam, it's okay. However, 0.5, 0.6, then it's not good. Alpha if deleted is each item, whether the reliability goes up when that item is removed. So that's all, but the important thing is the interpretation. Now, as you saw this is the same platform that I showed you earlier. We have difficulty or facility index, discrimination index, alpha for the entire exam, and alpha if removed. And for each distractor, now we had for MCQs, there are 5 options. 1 is the right answer, 4 are distractors. So that distractor analysis also is given. I will show you another screenshot for it. And then these are few statistics like the last exam, when was it held, last admin date, and the history of the item. So all that can be scrutinized when we are going to select a particular item for an exam, which is very useful. Now, with regard to difficulty, discrimination, and alpha if deleted, now usually software, it gives a number. That number we have to interpret. That is, we know that, okay, alpha, if alpha is given, then alpha if removed is higher, then there is a problem with the item. We know discrimination index, usually if it is minus or negative, it's not good. Now, how do we put together difficulty, discrimination, alpha if deleted, distractor analysis all together and come to a judgment? That judgment, I have not seen any computer software assisting. So for that reason, we tried to do that. So what we created is a traffic light system, where green is an excellent item, orange is something that there is a concern, but it's not terribly bad. Red is you have to do something, you have to review the item. So all these can be tested and put together and interpreted. So this particular software interprets for you to an extent. Now this is the interpretation. So see, these are green items. So all the color coding is there. Sorry, which means we know the software has considered difficulty, discrimination put together and saying an alpha if deleted and saying, okay, no problem, don't worry. But there may be other items which are orange. Some are red, and then we need to say why red. Okay, there is negative discrimination here. That's red. So I don't think we should actually remove this item, revisit this item, modify this item. We should not include it in another exam. Here you get the date, last exam that a particular item was included, and this history will tell you. Now this only tells you the last exam. History will tell you how many exams this item has been given, and then what are the difficulty and discrimination indices of these items, and so on. Right, I will show you that also in a further screenshot, this bit. So all that will be good for evaluation of exam. This is item analysis. And except this synthesizing interpretation, everything else you can find in a standard software without any problem. So this is bread and butter of any exam software, which is very useful for e-assessment, especially to take decisions. But if this sort of interpretation is also there, then it's very easy for you to take decisions. Right, feedback. Why feedback? Exams should provide opportunities for candidates to improve. This is what we call assessment for learning. Now, previously we used to call formative and summative exams, but now we don't use formative and summative exams that differently. Of course, still we use some exams formatively, especially these online quizzes and all that. Those are formative exam, then proper summative exam with all the precautions that I have discussed. However, even a summative exam can be used for learning purposes. And that's what we call assessment for learning. Any exam, even a summative exam, should be a learning exercise. So therefore, assessment for learning, you can say every exam is an exam for learning. And for us to learn, we need to receive feedback. Of course, when we receive the result, that is also feedback, because with the result, we will know whether we have done well, not so well, and so on. However, that alone is not enough. If we have more information about the exam and our result, that would be very useful. So candidates then can reflect on the feedback and plan to take action to correct their deficiencies. Now, a sound candidate dashboard. Actually, each candidate in the exam platform should have a dashboard that a candidate can access. The item bank, the candidate cannot access, but with a password and user word, that section of the software can be accessed. Some people, for security reasons, some institutions have that software separately, not connected to this. I think that is good practice, because I mean, you never know, there can be a mishap that will really sort of make your item bank vulnerable, so that you should not allow that. So having it separately is good, but a good one will have at least these, that if I am the candidate, it should give my score or my grade. But what's the point only having my grade? I don't know whether this is good or bad. So I should also, they used to give how I have improved over time. That is, last year I had got 3 out of 5. This year I am getting 4 out of 5. That means I know I am improving. Also, whether I am improving or not, whether I am doing okay in terms of other candidates. So that also I should have. So their scores in relation to others. So there, the candidate scores in relation to others, candidate scores change over time. Then finally, this dashboard should have some form for me to reflect and do some reflective writing. Reflective writing is not very heavy work. Just identifying, okay, these are my weaknesses. This is how I am going to improve. First thing, these are my strengths that I will keep. These are my weaknesses that I need to address. This is how I am going to address, and this is the evidence for it. Candidate should be able to write and upload those. That is actually would be part of an e-portfolio, electronic portfolio. And that sort of reflective writing opportunity should be given in a good feedback system. So these are, again, these are from the web. Now these are good practices. For example, mid-semester test. This is the candidate mark. This is the overall average, class average. So I know my mark is lower than class average. That is good. Then revision test. Again the same. My result, class average. Then the supplementary activities. Then the other from the LMS, other information. All those. Then the practical exams separately. All those can be included. Similarly, what I showed you earlier, the profiling of the candidate, that is the graphing the candidate ability. Also, it gives a projection what will happen, right? So we know, I know I have had a dip here, but I have recovered, meaning I have again come back to more than where I was at this point. So all these information, these are good dashboards for candidates where there is lot of feedback involved. Apart from this, of course, if the examiners have time, there can be space for them to type qualitative feedback. Of course, in a large cohort, this may not be possible, right? But that can, but you don't need to worry about it. If you have this information, candidates should be able to synthesize and come to a decision how they are going to improve. Right. Now, this part is feedback to candidates. Now, there is another feedback from candidates, because we as examiners, exam providers need to improve, like the candidates are improving. So we need to know whether the process was okay. The exam was okay, it was held well, it was marked well, exam results were released properly, all that we need to ask. Now, how are we going to ask? Maybe we can ask paper-based, but in an assessment system where electronic technologies can be used, nowadays it's far more easy to ask it electronically. The commonest ones are electronic forms like Google Forms, SurveyMonkey and all those, or simply you send an email. Of course, I mean, this I found in the web. It's interesting. The 3 most common methods collecting event feedback: emails, paper forms, event apps, that is applications. So even now, the 3 most, out of the 3 most common, 2 most common are electronic formats, and your response rates goes up because candidates are more familiar and they can do it on the go. So again, building into the system some feedback form from the candidates would be very useful, and that can be done electronically without any problem. If that is impossible, then just create a Google form, then an email. That's the easiest. And then another advantage of this is that analysis of the results of the form will be automatic. Right. That is that step about evaluation and feedback. May I have, if there are any questions, I am happy to answer now.
Actually, we have one question about the previous content.
Okay.
Can you recommend softwares that can include mapping? And the audience are also asking about your email for later. So if you can.
Right. Okay, I can share my email, because I mean, or I know, I mean, I'm except this year, I have been a frequent visitor to Saudi Arabia. So I have visited many schools in Saudi Arabia, many colleges, and I know most of you have some form of exam software you are using, but some other features that I said you may not be having. For example, item writing, because that facility is not available in the market. But others, I'm sure. But if I can share my email with you, you can surely, I mean, write to me. I can, because I don't think it's good practice to tell you the names of, because I'm not being funded by any of these vendors. So if I tell you only a few names of vendors, commercial software, that may be unfair to the others. They are good, but mostly at the same time they are very, very expensive. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we created our own, which gives us more facilities and also facility to write questions, which I feel is a great advancement. So I certainly I will give you my email, and I'm sure somebody in the office can surely, I mean, because I don't have your emails, Certainly in the organizing office, if somebody can share my email with them, I'm happy to help them. I mean, I can show them the pros and cons. I will not say buy this, don't buy that, but I can show them the pros and cons of different exam software. Is there anything else?
No, you can proceed.
Okay. Right. We are on to the final item in the stage in the cycle, that is item banking. If when we have done all this, we have to see what are the good items that need to go to the bank, what are the good bad items that we need to revisit and possibly edit.
Dr. Gomenda, just a reminder, 10 more minutes left.
Oh, okay, thank you. We can finish, don't worry. So why item banking? Good exam items, as you see, is very difficult to develop. Once developed, they should be preserved for future use. Preserving the items securely to be used in future is called item banking. Now, item banking will enable exam organizers to select items from a pool of good items developed over the years. That is a big facility, because you cannot write good 100 MCQs. That's very difficult. Far better to write 50 or 25 MCQs and get the other 25, 75 or 50 from the bank. Right. And this will lead to better exams with less error, because we are concentrating this time on a small number of items. Others are from the bank. Now, this is the same format, same screenshot, but this is the traffic light system, and that traffic light system gives us an idea what are good items, and those good items can be definitely banked. The others will have to be revisited, maybe removed. But when we are doing this, you have to go through these, but going through these is not a must, because we already the computer system has already synthesized for us, but still it's good to go through. Don't give everything to a computer. You should take informed decisions. Right. And what I said here, distract analysis also will give us, sometimes a question has become bad because of just one distractor. If you remove that distractor, question will be good. So that is very useful, distract analysis. Then this is what we call the history. History will give discrimination index and difficult index for different items, different individual options. So it's something like this. Item analysis history. That is also very useful, because the earlier one you see only for the overall average. This will give you for individual options the distract analysis. That would be very useful, because otherwise we don't know where the fault is or where the flaw is, because individual options can, maybe just one option is the problem. So all these would be quite handy, and good software. I know some software don't give this. Good software will always give this. And of course, you can generate a report with this option. Right. Our final Q&A. Are there questions before I go on?
So far we don't have any questions. Great. So thank you very much. You may proceed.
Yeah. So this is the cycle that we have finished. So issues and pitfalls. Stability of internet connection is a must if it is EE assessment. Issues of copying, impersonations and plagiarisms that we discussed will have to be dealt with. And that needs lot of effort. Sometimes it's not foolproof. Issues related to test security that we discussed will have to be addressed. And there is a big issue related to staff unfamiliarity with technology. Whatever the software you give, if you give without training, it will not work. So staff need to be trained on the software. Otherwise, first time, whatever the software they use, it will be difficult. They will say, oh, it's very difficult, it's better to do it by hand. But actually, it's not the case. It's just their unfamiliarity. Then we discussed about this also, inability to assess physical examination and hands-on skills through e-assessment. Then finally, difficulty in giving one-to-one face-to-face feedback. That is not a major problem, but sometimes you may want that. In that case, you will have to improvise. Right. So the take-home message is, know the limitations of e-assessment and make the best use of technology by using purposefully for the assessment activities that it is suited best. So just because there is e-assessment, you should not try to use it just for all the things. You have to select what are the best in this stage, in all the stages of the life cycle. You can start with a few stages and then slowly upgrade, rather than trying to do all in one go. That will never be a success. And even when you use it, know its limitations. You have to know its limitations and take care of. What is the future? Well, at the moment, presently, we do not have hard data about the candidate ability when we set an exam. So we set an exam with our best guess, with the best estimates and instincts about the candidate. We don't have, because we only after testing we know about the candidate. However, if we have data on candidate ability before the assessment, then we can set an exam, a better exam that will match closely with the candidate ability. Because the best exams are exams which matches closely with the candidate ability. If we set an exam which is very, very difficult, that is the abilities of the candidate is lower, exam is at a higher level, then there is a big gap between the ability and the candidate ability and the exam difficulty. Then it's not a good exam. Similarly, if we set an exam which is very, very easy, much easier than the ability of the candidates, then again everybody will pass. That's not a good exam either. So the best exams are exams that are set at the exact level of the candidate ability. However, we don't know the candidate ability until we make them sit. So in future, what I think is, with the use of artificial intelligence, it is possible to give one question, look at the answer, based on the answer, give another question. Based on the answer to that question, give yet another. So you can increase the question difficulty as and when the candidate answers. That will really give us the true candidate ability in an exam. That will give a real measure of the true candidate ability. Of course, it's still work in progress, but I think eventually we will get there. So eventually this means each candidate will be getting a special exam, unique exam, a personalized blueprint. So each candidate will have a personalized blueprint, of course, with a few overlaps. That overlap of questions are also necessary to maintain standard. So we can do that, of course, in future. So that is my final slide. Thank you very, very much. I am happy to take, if there are a few more minutes left. Yeah, there are 2 minutes left. I'm happy to take a question, the final question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gomenda. The audience are thanking you for a valuable lecture, and actually it was presented with simplicity yet with sophistication, ultimate sophistication. We are mesmerized by the fascinating webinar, Dr. Gomenda. It is impressively tackled e-assessment while sharing experiences holistically from all different angles. We thank you for a resourceful interactive workshop and it was really enriched with changes and opportunities for e-assessment, also very nicely summarized at the end. We also thank the Medical Education Department and the College of Nursing, and definitely Dr. Sara Al-Yusuf and Dr. Ramayan, and we are definitely waiting for more seminars.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much for the invitation, and I enjoyed every bit of it. Thank you.
I'd like just to, Dr. Samahti, Dr. Rumayya.
Oh, okay, hello.
Yeah, Dr. Gomenda, I'd like just to thank you very much for this extensive overview about the assessment, the life cycle of assessment, starting with the blueprint and the item banking, as well as dealing with the e-learning during this COVID-19. I'd like just to take this opportunity to thank our colleges in the College of Medicines in Riyadh and Jeddah, at King Saud Al Aziz University for Health Sciences, for arranging those webinars through the also the Department of Medical Educations headed by Dr. Sara Al-Yusuf, as well as I wanted to thank the Postgraduate Center and all the teams, Dr. Ali Zawawi, as well as Ms. Diba, and the IT support, Mr. Musa, and all the teams that has worked with this webinars, a series of webinars. And just I'd like also to thank all the speakers and the moderators who worked with us in those webinars. Just a reminder for the audience who are really thanking them of participating with us, is to, if you can write your suggestions for the content of the next webinars, and also a feedback. That would be really nice, and thank you again.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very, very much.
Yeah, thank you to Dr. Gominda and the whole team. Excellent job. Thank you. So we will end the presentation now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.